Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be diving in again.
So today we're shifting gears a bit, aren't we? Moving away, maybe, from the really nitty-gritty mathematical details of Aryabhata's Aryabhatiya.
That's right. We've spent a good amount of time looking at the technical side, how brilliant it was, how it traveled the world, its impact.
Absolutely. But there's this lingering question, isn't there? Was this incredible work just, a super advanced calculation handbook for astronomers?
Or did it represent something deeper? A whole worldview, perhaps?
Exactly. That's what we want to get into today. This deep dive is all about exploring the context around the math, the philosophy, the culture, the ethics that were swirling around in Gupta India when Aryabhata was working.
We want to try to understand how people back then actually perceived the cosmos. What was their universe like in their minds?
And what role did mathematics play in that understanding? Was it just a tool or something more?
And crucially, what were the ethical rules of the game when it came to scientific discovery and sharing that knowledge?
It's easy for us, I think, to project our modern view back. Science over here, philosophy and ethics over there, neatly separated.
But that's often not how it worked in the ancient world, is it? These two were frequently woven together.
Yeah, integrated. So the pursuit of knowledge itself, like Aryabhata's quest, might have had this layer of profound meaning we sometimes miss.
It wasn't just about the answers, but the way you sought them.
Okay, let's unpack that. Where do we start? Maybe with how they saw the universe itself.
Good place to start. It seems pretty clear that Aryabhata's astronomy, and likely the thinking of his time, was anchored in this belief that the universe isn't chaotic.
Not random.
No, quite the opposite. Fundamentally ordered, harmonious. There's this key concept in Indian thought, Gita.
I come across that. It's like the underlying cosmic order, the rhythm of the universe.
That's a good way to put it. The inherent principle that governs everything keeps it all in balance. And the really fascinating part for our discussion is how they believed you could understand it to ta.
Okay.
Through mathematics. gaṇitaṃ.
So math wasn't just for counting or measuring fields.
Far from it. It was seen as the key, the language almost, that could unlock the secrets of this cosmic harmony.
Wow. And you see hints of this right in the Aryabhatiya itself, don't you?
You absolutely do. Right at the very beginning, the first verse of the Gītikāpāda, the opening section.
What does it say?
Well, it starts with reverence, an invocation to Brahman.
Brahman, okay, the ultimate reality, the sort of all-encompassing principle in Hinduism.
Precisely, the ground of all being.
Yeah.
And then, immediately after paying respect to Brahman, what does Aryabhata list?
Let me guess.
Math, you got it. He lists the three things his text covers. Mathematics, the reckoning of time, kala kriya, and the sphere, gola, which is basically astronomy.
So Brahman,
Right.
then math, time, and astronomy. That ordering feels deliberate.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, interpretations can always differ, but placing mathematics right there, right after invoking the ultimate reality, it strongly suggests a worldview
A worldview
where Brahman, this ultimate source, expresses its own inherent order, its structure, through mathematical principles.
So math isn't just human invention in this view. It's woven into the fabric of reality itself.
Exactly. It's the language the cosmos uses to speak, to reveal its own rationality. It elevates mathematics beyond just a practical tool.
It makes it almost sacred, a path to understanding something fundamental.
Yes, I think that's fair to say. Exploring mathematical truths, figuring out astronomical cycles. This wasn't just number crunching. It was seen as a way to directly perceive and understand the inherent harmony of the universe, the atta.
So when Aryabhata was deep in his calculations, maybe he felt he was doing more than just predicting eclipses. He was deciphering the cosmic code.
That's a compelling way to think about it. It gives the whole enterprise a much deeper significance, doesn't it? Understanding the principles governing reality.
It really does. And this ties into the larger cosmological picture of the time too, right? The whole idea of vast cycles of time.
Absolutely. The concept of yugas, these immense ages the universe cycles through, was deeply ingrained in traditional Indian cosmology. And memless cycles of creation, destruction, rebirth.
And Aryabhata works with these yugas in his system.
He does. But here's where his own innovation, his mathematical mind, comes sharply into focus. He takes these traditional vast time cycles.
Does what?
He defines the subdivisions, the smaller yugas within the larger cycle, as having equal durations.
Equal durations. Why is that significant? Weren't they traditionally unequal?
Sometimes described that way, yes, with varying lengths based on mythological accounts or older traditions. But Aryabhata imposes this mathematical neatness, this symmetry.
Ah, so he's prioritizing mathematical coherence, computational elegance, maybe, over sticking strictly to the older stories.
That's exactly what it looks like. It suggests he believed the fundamental structure of cosmic time itself was best represented by this clean mathematical pattern.
That's a bold move, in a way.
It is. It's a subtle but powerful statement. It reinforces this idea we were just discussing, that mathematics isn't just a descriptive tool. It's the underlying language.
Yeah.
The universe, for Aryabhata, seems to operate according to these rational mathematical principles.
So understanding the universe means understanding its mathematical structure.
Precisely. And his refinement of the yuga system is a prime example of him applying that mathematical lens to make sense of the cosmos in the most coherent way he could.
Okay, so we have this picture of a universe understood through mathematics, reflecting a divine or ultimate order. But what about the human side, the process of doing this science? Were there ethical considerations?
Oh, definitely. It wasn't a free-for-all. The Aryabhatiya, even if not explicitly an ethics textbook, certainly implies a strong ethical framework around knowledge, jnana.
Jnana, knowledge itself. What were the key principles?
Accuracy, intellectual honesty. These seem paramount. And you have to remember the context.
Right, this wasn't just theoretical.
No way. Astronomical knowledge was incredibly practical. It determined the calendar.
Which affects festivals, rituals.
Agriculture, when to plant, when to harvest. Even things like astrology, which was often intertwined with astronomy then. Getting the calculations wrong wasn't just an academic mistake.
It could mess things up for society. Big time.
Exactly. There were real-world consequences. So the pressure for accuracy, for integrity in your calculations and observations must have been immense.
And Aryabhata himself addresses this, doesn't he? I remember reading something about a warning he gives.
He does. It's quite striking. Right at the end of the Gītikāpāda, the section on the celestial sphere, the very last verse,
What does he warn against?
he warns against anyone creating what he calls pratikañcukaṃ of his work.
Pratikañcukaṃ, what does that mean?
It's usually translated as something like counterfeit, distortion, or false imitation. Essentially, deliberately misrepresenting or corrupting his findings.
So intellectual fraud, basically. Plagiarism or deliberate distortion.
Yes. And look at the consequences he attaches to it. He says anyone who does this will destroy their own good merit, their puja, and even shorten their lifespan, their ayus.
Wow. That's serious. That's not just you'll get a bad reputation. That's cosmic level consequences.
It really elevates intellectual dishonesty, doesn't it? It makes it a grave ethical failing, almost a spiritual crime. It suggests the knowledge itself is precious, almost sacred, and distorting it is a serious transgression.
It puts a huge weight on the scholar's shoulders. A moral obligation to be truthful, accurate, and to transmit the knowledge faithfully.
Absolutely. You can feel the importance placed on preserving the integrity of this foundational scientific knowledge. It's not just your work, it's part of a larger chain, something future generations will build upon.
So you have a duty to keep the source pure, so to speak.
That seems to be the implication. Corrupting it at the source could lead everything built upon it astray. It speaks to a deep sense of responsibility.
Okay, so accuracy and faithful transmission are key ethical pillars. But does that mean just blindly copying what came before? What about progress? What about questioning things?
That's the fascinating other side of the coin. Because Aryabhata, while clearly valuing integrity, was absolutely not advocating for blind acceptance. He was a huge champion of using your own brain.
Your own intellect.
Exactly. This brings us to another really important concept that shines through in his work. Svamati.
Svamati. Okay, break that down for us.
Sva means own or self, and mati refers to intellect, reason, understanding, mind. So svamati is one's own intellect or one's own reasoning.
And Aryabhata emphasizes this.
Very strongly. There's this incredible verse, Pada 49, just before the warning we discussed. He talks about the difficulty of finding truth.
How does he put it?
He describes the existing body of knowledge, presumably astronomical and mathematical texts and traditions, as an ocean of true and false knowledge. A mixture.
Okay, so tradition isn't perfect. It's got good stuff and bad stuff mixed together.
Precisely. And how do you navigate this confusing ocean? How do you rescue the true knowledge?
Let me guess. With Svamati.
You got it. He says he does it svamatināvā, by the boat of my own intellect.
The boat of my own intellect. That's a fantastic image.
Isn't it? It powerfully conveys the idea that, yes, you engage with tradition, you learn from the ocean of existing knowledge, but ultimately, the tool you use to discern truth from falsehood, to navigate safely, is your own critical intelligence, your buddhi, your mati.
So it's an ethical duty almost, not just to preserve knowledge, but to actively analyze it, to test it.
Yes, that's the implication. True understanding, for Aryabhata, isn't passive acceptance of authority or tradition. It requires active engagement,
Calculation, observation, critical thinking.
rigorous analysis, verifying things for yourself. And if your own reasoning, your svamatināvā, shows that something in the tradition is flawed.
You have a responsibility to point it out, or even correct it.
Exactly. It's an ethical obligation to use your own intellect to refine knowledge, to push towards greater truth, even if it means challenging long-held beliefs.
And Aryabhata practiced what he preached, didn't he? We mentioned his innovations earlier.
Perfect examples. His radical idea, for the time, that the Earth rotates on its axis to explain the apparent movement of the stars.
Instead of the heavens revolving around a stationary Earth.
Right. That flew in the face of common perception and likely much traditional thought. And his decision to impose mathematical symmetry on the yugas.
Making the sub-yugas equal.
These weren't just random guesses. They were conclusions he reached by applying his samadhi, his powerful mathematical reasoning, to the problems. He saw inconsistencies, or perhaps mathematically less elegant solutions in the existing models, and he used his own intellect to propose better ones.
So svamatināvā is the engine of innovation, driven by an ethical commitment to reasoned inquiry.
Beautifully put. It shows this incredible intellectual courage, grounded in the belief that your own reasoned conclusions, properly derived, hold authority.
Even against the weight of tradition. Which leads us to think about that balance, doesn't it? Tradition versus innovation. How did Aryabhata navigate that? It sounds like a tightrope walk.
It really does seem like a careful balancing act. His work clearly shows he respected and built upon the existing Indian astronomical traditions. He didn't just throw everything out and start from scratch.
He used the established concepts, the terminology.
He operated within that lineage, that stream of knowledge, but he wasn't bound by it uncritically.
That ocean of true and false knowledge idea again.
Exactly. Gola 49 is so telling. It implies that tradition itself is not monolithic or infallible. It needs to be examined, sifted through, using the tool of samadhi.
So the ethical scholar has this dual role.
That's how I see it emerging from his work. On one hand, you have a responsibility to understand and preserve the genuine wisdom, the authentic core passed down through tradition. You need to respect your intellectual ancestors. But you also have an equally important responsibility to use your own gaṇitaṃ mathematics and svamatināvā reasoning to rigorously test that tradition, to identify the false bits in that ocean.
And refine it, correct it where necessary.
Yes, to improve upon it in the ongoing pursuit of satya, of truth. It's not about rebellion for its own sake, nor blind obedience.
It's about responsible evolution of knowledge.
That's a great way to phrase it. A dynamic engagement where respect for the past is coupled with the courage to innovate based on reasoned evidence and calculation.
It's quite a sophisticated epistemology, isn't it? Balancing lineage with individual critical thought.
It really is. It avoids the pitfalls of being stuck in the past, but also avoids carelessly discarding accumulated wisdom.
When you put all these pieces together, the view of a harmonious, mathematically ordered cosmos,
The high ethical premium placed on accuracy and intellectual honesty,
the championing of samadhi, the scholar's own reasoning,
and this careful dance between respecting tradition and driving innovation.
it paints a picture of the scholarly life, the pursuit of knowledge, as something more than just a job, doesn't it?
It really starts to feel like something else, maybe. A kind of disciplined path, a practice,
You mean like a sadhana, like a spiritual or ethical discipline?
perhaps. That might be one way to frame it. Think about it. Doing the work with absolute integrity, with meticulous care and calculation and observation, constantly applying critical self-awareness through svamatināvā, wrestling with complex ideas.
It requires discipline, focus, honesty.
Exactly. These aren't just professional standards in the modern sense. In that worldview, where understanding the cosmic order was potentially a way of connecting with deeper truths, satya, maybe engaging in this scholarly work ethically was itself seen as a path.
A path towards what? Towards understanding reality more deeply.
Plausibly, yes. A way to align oneself with the rational, ordered nature of the cosmos through the very act of studying it with integrity and intellectual rigor.
That gives the whole endeavor a profound sense of purpose, a deep responsibility. It's not just about publishing papers or getting famous.
No, it imbues the work with meaning. The how becomes just as important as the what's. Conducting science ethically becomes part of the journey towards truth itself.
So when we look back at Aryabhata and the Aryabhatiya through this lens, we see more than just equations and planetary models.
Much more. We see a glimpse of a scientific mind embedded within a rich worldview. A worldview that connects the precision of numbers to the harmony of the universe.
And one that held intellectual honesty and reasoned inquiry samadhi as incredibly high ethical values.
Yes, alongside a complex understanding of how to engage with tradition, respecting it, learning from it, but never being afraid to question and refine it using one's own critical faculties.
It's a really sophisticated approach, harmonizing that respect for lineage with the courage, the ethical imperative almost, to use your own reason.
It truly is. It presents a model of scholarship that feels remarkably relevant even today.
Which brings us to a final thought, perhaps, for you listening. We've talked about Aryabhata's time, but think about now. How does this tension, this interplay between established knowledge, tradition, if you like, and the drive for innovation fueled by critical inquiry, how does that continue to play out in science and knowledge creation today?
That's a great question. What are the ethical responsibilities of scientists, scholars, creators today as they navigate that same ocean of true and false knowledge, especially with information and misinformation spreading so rapidly?
Something to definitely chew on. It shows how looking back at figures like Aryabhata isn't just history, it can spark reflection on our own times.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been fascinating, really getting under the surface of the Aryabhatiya.
It adds so much depth beyond just the scientific results.
It really does. And next time on the deep dive, we'll be tying all these threads together. We'll aim for an overall conclusion, looking back at Aryabhata's incredible scientific contributions, their lasting impact, and weaving in these philosophical and ethical dimensions we've explored today.
A final synthesis of Aryabhata's world.
Exactly. So please join us then for the concluding chapter in our deep dive into Aryabhata.